To introduce our next speaker, I have our wonderful Division Director, Alicia Moreno Ramirez.
Good morning. Thank you so much, John. My name is Alicia Moreno Ramirez, and I'm the Division Director of the Multilingual Support Division at California Department of Education. And it's my pleasure to welcome everyone back to day 2 of the MEP Program Directors Meeting. MSD is pleased to have the leadership of the Migrant Education Office bringing us all together into the shared space. Today, in addition to having the pleasure of the presence of your colleagues, we have the terrific opportunity to learn from an exceptional voice. It is my pleasure to introduce esteemed sociologist, Dr. Pedro Noguera, a well-respected authority on the educational impact of social issues. Dr. Noguera is the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of Rassier School of Education and a distinguished professor of education at the University of Southern California. Dr. Noguera's research focuses on the ways in which schools are influenced by social and economic conditions, as well as by demographic trends in local, regional, and global contexts. Prior to joining USC, Dr. Noguera served as a distinguished professor of education at the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles. Before joining faculty at UCLA, he served as a tenured professor and holder of endowed chairs at New York University, Harvard University, and the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Noguera serves on the boards of numerous national and local organizations and appears as a regular commentator on educational issues on CNN, MSNBC, and National Public Radio, and other national news outlets, and has authored a plethora of research articles and books. I encourage us to all listen with enthusiasm and intent, considering explicit application to the experiences of migratory students and your local migrant education programs. Please help me welcome Dr. Pedro Noguera.
Thank you, Alicia, and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. And to be in this conversation with you about how to serve our migrant students. So I'm going to share my screen and share some slides to get us started. So as you can see from the title, Excellence Through Equity, what I'm focused on today is how can we ensure that migrant students have access to an excellent education that is also equitable. And I'm going to explain what that means and how we create the conditions that will lead to the success of those students. So let me start by just asking you to think about what you know about the children of migrant workers. I really want you to think about that for a moment, about their lives, about the challenges they face, about their strengths, their resilience, about how they learn, and the things that might get in the way of their learning in school. I want to start by saying this: the more we know about the students we serve, and this is true of all students, and especially true of children of migrant workers, the more we'll know about how to serve them well. Knowing them means we actually have to know them, though. The biggest obstacle to knowing them are stereotypes, assumptions, and broad generalizations. That actually gets in the way of figuring out how to do this work. So here's something we do know, that the issues facing migrant workers, the adults, their parents, affect the children too. And what are some of the issues we should be aware of? First of all, many migrant workers are subjected to coercion. That is, that they're in workplaces where they are under working under dangerous conditions, where they lack benefits, where sometimes they're subjected to wage theft, where they're working under extreme heat. During COVID, many of them were exposed to the virus at very alarming rates. And even now, with vaccines available, many of them can't get the vaccine because they can't get time off from work. All of these issues affect their children. And we shouldn't be surprised, because that's true for all children. Whether we're talking about children who have college educated parents and the way that those parents are able to pass the benefits of that education onto their children, or kids who experience homelessness, or kids who have no parents because they're in foster care. Parents always matter, always shape the experiences of their children. So part of what we have to do is figure out how do we work with the parents of migrant children? Because building partnerships that are rooted in trust and respect are critical to improving outcomes for migrant students. So some of the things that we know migrant students need, and we know this from research, you know this from your experience in working with them. We know that they need stability in learning opportunities, because many of them, due to the circumstances of work, the circumstances that their parents live under, switch schools often, which means there's no continuity in learning, no stability in relationships with teachers and peers. And this impacts their performance in school, but also impacts their sense of belonging. And belonging is important because one of the things we know developmentally, and this is not new, is that kids who feel connected to school, who have strong positive relationships and their peers, do better than kids who don't. Migrant kids often experience marginalization and weak relations with teachers and peers. They also frequently need social and emotional support that, if you don't know them, may go unnoticed. Maybe manifest, we might think that the problem is poor attendance, when in fact there's much more going on in their lives that's keeping them from getting to school on a regular basis or on time. And then finally, we know that they need guidance about the future. Many of these students will not go to college unless we began planting the seeds for college and helping to understand the steps required early on. We cannot wait till senior year. But guess what? The parents of affluent children don't wait till senior year either. I asked my students, before I left UCLA, I asked them, at what point did you know you were going to college? And one student raised his hand. He says, I always knew I was going to college. I said, well, why is that? He said, because my parents told me from the time I was a baby, you're going to college. They had a fund for me. It wasn't a question of which college, but which college I would go to. Well, migrant students aren't always in that kind of situation. In fact, because many of them have parents that did not go to college, college is a mystery that they know nothing about. Here's what we know about kids. Kids who think they're going somewhere, who have a clear path to college, will make different decisions than kids who have no clarity about what's required, what's expected to get there. So to make more progress, we've got to focus on the right questions. Here are some questions that I've been asking in my work for many years, because I think that focusing on raising achievement, raising attendance, is the wrong focus. And that's because those are outcomes. And if you don't understand the circumstances of migrant students, you're never going to get higher achievement or better attendance. So here's a question I've been focused on. How do we use education to break the cycle of poverty? I want you to think about that for a moment. I will bet there are some people on this webinar today who are living examples that this is possible, because you are proof of it. You come from a family that was once in poverty. You come from parents that did not have a lot of formal education or money, but you've been able to use education to improve your life, to earn a good salary, to support yourself and your family. I'm one of those people. Neither of my parents graduated from college or from high school. They managed to send all 6 of us to college, some of the best colleges in the country: Harvard, Brown, Berkeley, 2 at Berkeley, 1 to Cornell. When my father was asked by friends often, how did you manage to do this? He said, it wasn't me, it was their mother. Because I wasn't around, I was always working. My father always worked 2 jobs. And when they asked my mother, how'd you do it? She said, I just made sure they did the right thing. You don't have to have a college degree to get your kids to go to college. You do have to care, and you do have to understand what you can do as a parent. And that's why working with parents, empowering our parents with information is so essential to changing outcomes. It's equally important that we connect our students, migrant students especially, to influential adults, to mentors who open doors, who provide access to social capital. Social capital are the connections that give you access to internships and to jobs and to information that you otherwise would not have known was available. That's one of the things that affluent kids always have over poor kids. They have connections. They have parents who are opening doors, uncles and aunts and teachers and counselors. That's what migrant kids need. And so part of the work, if we want to use education to break the cycle of poverty, is to empower our students so they understand the power of education, the power of knowledge to change lives, and connecting them to influential adults and mentors who can help them. Now, part of connecting them to a mentor means they have to know they need mentoring. And not all kids know that, as we know. Not all kids know that they need adults, some adults who may not be like them at all, who are familiar with the system and how it works and who can open doors. Really key for changing outcomes. Second question, how do we ensure that migrant students feel supported, stimulated, and excited about learning? I said before that the goal is not to raise achievement. That's an outcome. To get there, we've got to get students engaged as learners. Engagement is the pathway to higher achievement. And in a moment, I'm going to explain what engagement entails. How do we make sure they feel stimulated, motivated to learn, so that they invest their energy to excel? And how do we get them excited about learning? How often do the students tell you, wow, what a day, I was so inspired by what we learned in school? That's what learning should do. Because when that happens for a student, they get control over their education. My father, who I told you did not have formal education, was an avid reader. He used to tell us, you can get a free education with a library card. And he practiced it. And he and my mother made us go to the library on Saturdays after our chores, after the chores. Fortunately for us, there was always a librarian, in my case, Miss McDonald, who was there to talk to us to find out what we were interested in and then suggest books. At the age of 8, Ms. McDonald suggested I read A Wrinkle in Time. I'm forever grateful. I would have never read it on my own, but that book got me excited about reading. I was back a week later for more. When kids get a good education, they want more education. When kids become independently motivated readers, they get control over their lives and over their education. Third question, How can schools play a role in supporting migrant families? Really important. Families shape the experiences and the circumstances of their kids and shape their long-term outlook. Many of the kids will drop out of school early to work, to support their families. I've had students at UCLA tell me they were about to drop out of school. I had one of my students who was valedictorian of his high school in San Diego told me he's gonna drop out of school. I said, why? He said, because my mother cleans houses and I need to help her. I feel guilty being here and living in a dorm, knowing my mother is out there cleaning houses and she's sick with a bad back. I could understand where the student was, but I had to spend time with him, convincing him that working while he's in school to send money home, but staying in school was better than leaving school, because he would be able to help her more in the future with that education. We need to invest in building partnerships that are rooted in trust and respect with migrant parents. Here's some things we know. We know this research from the World Bank. When we educate girls, we can reduce poverty. Think about that. That's a long-standing finding. It's one of the reasons why in Afghanistan, educating girls was seen as such an important strategy. Although, who knows what's going to happen now. Why is educating girls so important? Because educated women earn more money and are more likely to spend the money they earn on their children. That's not always the case for men. They're also less likely to have babies early. They put off childbirth and have fewer babies, which means there's more money to go around for a smaller number of children. And finally, very importantly, the mother is the first teacher in most families. If the mother has education, she's able to pass on the benefits of that education, read to her child, develop the literacy skills in her children, and make better choices about where that child's going to go to school. So we want to invest in women and girls. We also want to make sure that we are clear about the meaning of equity. Now, I know in some parts of the country now, equity has suddenly become taboo. I think it's largely political, but it's also because there's a lot of confusion. People don't really know what equity means. Equity is about giving students what they need to be successful. But it's also about recognizing that not all kids are the same. It's like giving everybody shoes to wear versus giving everybody shoes that fit. Makes a difference, doesn't it? So when we think about equity in education, we're recognizing that the academic needs of a student are related to their social, their material, and their emotional needs as well. You can't separate those. It's also about recognizing that kids learn in different ways. They're not all the same. It's about acknowledging the obstacles they may face that get in the way of educational success. But equity work is always focused on the evidence and the outcomes. The evidence that kids really are learning, that they are making progress. And that should show in grades. It should show in their scores. It should show in their attendance and their college enrollment. It can't simply be a slogan, which is what I always worry about. It becomes nothing more than a cheap slogan. And very importantly, when we're committed to equity, we're willing to take action and speak up when we see kids denied the opportunity to learn. When we know they're languishing in a classroom with a teacher that can't meet their needs, or they're in a school that's ignoring their basic needs. We speak up, we take action. We don't just do the paperwork like we're in compliance when the kids' needs aren't being met. So many people confuse treating students equally with treating them equitably. This diagram illustrates the difference and helps people to say, yep, you're right. If I want all kids to participate in learning, some kids are going to need more support. They'll need eyeglasses, for example, if they have reading difficulty. They might need help with homework, because homework, something as basic as homework, is an equity issue. If you have a college-educated parent and a computer at home, you have an advantage over the kids who don't. How many of you help your own kids with homework, even when you're tired? And how many of you know very well that some of the students you serve have no one at all to help them? There is a reason why the most privileged kids outperform the others. And that's because their parents are investing in them. They start out with more, they keep getting more along the way. And there's the reasons why kids, migrant students, often fall behind, because they face other challenges, other obstacles. So the key to equity work is eliminating the barriers. Eliminating the barriers that prevent them from pursuing their education and from excelling. So what are the typical barriers? Well, number one is the tendency to rationalize underperformance, low expectations, blaming the parents, or just accepting it, that's the way it is. That's always been the way it is. And when you hear that kind of complacency, you know that's the problem. Secondly, lack of capacity. There are too many examples of unprepared, unskilled teachers or uncaring teachers working with kids who don't know how to meet their needs. Lack of resources in the schools to meet those needs. Although right now we have more money coming to schools than we've ever had here in California. Real question is, do the districts know how to spend that money to meet the needs of the kids they've historically served poorly? Bias, racial bias, cultural bias, linguistic bias can be a real obstacle. So I want you to think about your schools. What's getting in the way of meeting the needs of migrant students? What's the work look like so we can change outcomes? I often say that if you think like a parent, and any parent who has more than one child should understand equity, because your own kids are not all the same. I have 5 kids, and they're all different. Here's us at breakfast with a few extras. Breakfast is equity time. Why? Because they all have different needs. Some of them are, this one over here is gluten-free and vegan. Hard to feed them. This little one up front doesn't like food at all. We have to chase her. Everybody's got to eat, but they don't eat the same thing. Think about the migrant students you serve and what are their needs? What's preventing them from excelling, from thriving? So I want you to think about the equity challenges facing migrant students you serve. What do you know about them? What do you know about the schools? What's been preventing you and your colleagues from addressing these challenges? What gets in the way? Is it attitudes, beliefs, inertia? And how effective are the measures your district or the district you work with have taken to compensate for the disadvantages facing migrant students? A lot of times people try things and don't evaluate. Don't ask, well, did it work? What's the evidence show? Evidence matters. So I want you to think about what we're doing to build capacity in schools to improve the outcomes of migrant students. One of the things we know is that when the skills of the staff match and are aligned with the needs of the students, outcomes for students go up. That means you have to know what the needs of the students are and tailor professional development for the staff to meet those needs. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Not all teachers are the same either. Some teachers are strong in content. Some teachers are weak in the subjects they teach. Some teachers are strong in pedagogy. They can teach a variety of kids. Some teachers can only teach one way, often lecture. Some teachers are great at building relationships. Some teachers don't even know that's part of the job. We've got to figure out what are the needs of those teachers and how do we make sure they get the professional development they need to be better able to meet the needs of migrant students. Now, capacity building also may mean that schools need partnerships because they can't do it all alone. They might need access to more food because the kids are coming to school hungry. Or they might need access to health services because kids have basic health needs, dental needs, optometry that are getting in the way. Schools can't do it all by themselves. You have to be the broker, help schools to get the services they need so they can get them to the kids. When we build capacity, when we are working together to solve problems, outcomes for kids improve. As leaders, you've got to be problem solvers and not merely casting blame or pushing it off the responsibility on someone else. The research shows that when schools are focused on these 5 essential ingredients, outcomes for all kinds of students, including migrant students, can improve. The research was done by the University of Chicago at the Consortium on School Improvement. Question they asked is, many schools across the country have been reformed. Which ones have gotten better and stayed better? And what they found through their research is that when these 5 essential ingredients are present, then schools get better results for all kinds of kids. Inner city kids, rural kids, homeless kids, children of migrant workers. The 5 essentials are, first, they've got to have a coherent instructional guidance system. Coherence means they know how to teach, they're clear about what they're teaching and how to teach it. How to intervene when kids are not making progress. You get coherence by teachers meeting together, planning together, looking at student work together. Second, ongoing development of the professional capacity. This is what I alluded to a moment ago. It's about ensuring that teachers have the full range of skills needed to meet the needs of their students. At USC, we have a great teacher ed program. I'm very proud of it, but we produce novice teachers, not master teachers. Where do master teachers come from? They come from the classroom. Seniority is no guarantee you'll be a master, because teaching is a craft that requires ongoing commitment to reflection, to building your professional skills, which you can't do in isolation, not easily. So that's why we have to bring teachers together to do this work. Third, strong parent-community ties. As I've said already, when there's reinforcement at home for the learning in school, outcomes for kids improve. That's the reason why we want to get parents involved. And I realize the parents of migrant children are often very difficult to get involved, so we might have to go out to reach them rather than expecting them to come to the school. because their schedules don't allow it. We might have to have staff that can speak their language so that we can communicate without judgment about what they need to do to support their children. We have to realize and recognize that parents always matter. And part of improving outcomes for children is improving our relationships with their parents. Fourth, there has to be a student-centered learning climate. This is about the culture of school. This is about the quality of the relationships, about creating a student-centered environment as opposed to an adult-centered environment, about creating a sense of belonging, an ethos that builds the character of kids, instills a sense of dignity and respect in them. Every school has a culture. Not all schools have a positive culture. Schools to create a positive, affirming environment where not only do the kids do well and feel safe and supported, but adults feel safe and supported too. The morale of the staff will influence the outcomes of the kids. I've never been to a high-performing school where the staff feels beaten down and disrespected. Never seen it. How do you create an environment where people work together and are willing to work harder because they have a clear sense of mission and purpose? That's also about the fifth essential ingredient, which is leadership. Shared vision. A vision to which we hold ourselves accountable. So I want you to look at these 5 essentials and ask yourself, how do the schools I work with now compare on these? How can I help my schools be clear that this is what they need to focus on if they want to improve outcomes for the kids? Very important, because if all the work is directed at the kids and we ignore the environment they're in, nothing's going to change. We're asking kids to excel in spite of the environment. I'm going to encourage you to think about, how do I get the schools to change the environment, to create the conditions that bring out better outcomes for migrant students? So, as I said, this is about coherence. When you think about instruction, it's about making learning visible so teachers are not just talking at kids, right? Because teaching and talking are not the same. It's about looking for the evidence of learning. Here's an example of a teacher doing just that. Now, these are not migrant students, but all of these kids are recent immigrants. None of them speak English at home. This is Hollenbeck Middle School in East LA. Most of these kids come from families that are barely getting by financially. Their parents, construction, hotels, restaurants, many of them undocumented. But this is an 8th grade math class. These kids are doing algebra, okay? Algebra is a gateway course to college. And they're up out of their seats. Why is that important? Well, it's important because this is middle school. And one of the things that I know about middle school, having taught middle school, is middle schoolers have trouble sitting still. They move, they talk. They were talking in this classroom about math. They were working in groups, which means they're not just learning math. They're learning how to work together. They're learning how to collaborate. They're learning how to deal with conflict, because middle schoolers will have conflict. And the teacher is so good, she can stand in the back and talk to me. She doesn't have to hover. She's not worried about controlling the kids, because the kids are in control of learning, which means she can facilitate learning. She can move among them. She can differentiate support. She can keep them on task. And because they're learning this way, learning is visible. She can see which ones are getting it, which ones aren't, which ones might need to work together. In this class, they were doing a project. They were designing a house. based on the dimensions the teacher had given them. And then they had to order supplies, how many bricks to get, how about the flooring, cement. They were applying what they learned in algebra to something they could see, something very tangible. And many of them come from families where their parents work in construction. So it was not unfamiliar. It was culturally relevant. And they were using their language skills to grapple with something really meaningful. Now, I often point out to many educators that in a lot of schools, the only kids who get to learn like this are the kids in the honors. Because we don't think the other kids can do this. We don't trust them to do group work. A lot of teachers are afraid of losing control. Not this teacher, because she's prepared them. She knows her kids. She knows which kids can work together and which kids shouldn't work together. She didn't start with 90 minutes. She started with 10 minutes and gradually increased the amount of time on task. She gave them protocols for how to work together. Who are your teachers that know how to teach like this? Do you give them a chance to show the others who can't and don't think it's possible? That's the kind of professional development our teachers need. So I want to encourage you to think about engagement. As I said before, engagement is the path to achievement. Engagement is multidimensional. First and foremost, it's behavioral. You can see it. Are they on task? Are they doing their work? Are they prepared? It's also cognitive. Do they understand what's expected of them? What does the work show? Are they making connections? What do the questions they ask show? And then finally, engagement is also emotional. Do they care? Are they trying hard? And if not, maybe they're not that interested. Maybe what we're asking them to do is boring, and we haven't figured out how to tap into their interest so it's something that they see as worthwhile. When these three elements of engagement come together, outcomes for kids improve because they become more invested as learners. That's what we're after. So we have to stay focused on the evidence of learning if we're going to change outcomes for migrant students. We have to make expectations clear and the standards explicit so they know what good work looks like. We should constantly check for understanding, because just because they shake their heads or they're quiet doesn't mean they really understood what's expected of them. We should give students numerous opportunities to revise their work and resubmit. I don't do my best work on the first draft. I have to revise over and over again sometimes to get it right. I'm sure that's true of many of you. The real learning is not in the first submission, but the revision. The real teaching is not in the grading, but the feedback, helping the student to understand where they went wrong, how to get that work from a C level to an A level. When we give good, constructive, positive feedback, our kids are more likely to become invested as learners. We need to make sure that we keep samples of their work so that if they move to another school, to another classroom, they can take their work with them to show the next teacher, this is what I've done. This is where I am at. Don't you do that when you go to a new doctor? You want your medical records to go with you. Let's make sure their academic records follow them too, but not just their grades, samples of their work that show the evidence of what they can do. And then let's give teachers a chance to look at student work together. And I have to say, the most powerful professional development I've ever seen in any school is bringing teachers together on a regular basis to look at student work. Because when they look at student work together, the connections between teaching and learning become clear. Teachers can see Some teachers are getting better work out of kids than others. And if this is done without judgment and without incrimination, it's an opportunity for teachers to learn together and improve together. So I encourage you, if you're in schools where this is not happening, to get the principals to see the value of analyzing student work together. Here are two individuals who had different theories of motivation. Gentleman on the right is Roland Fryer. Roland Fryer is an economist at Harvard who came up with the idea that the best way to get better performance from kids was to pay them. Pay them to read, pay them to come to school, pay them for higher test scores. And because he's an economist at Harvard, he got a bunch of foundations to give him money, and he ran an experiment to see if paying kids for better work, would lead to higher achievement. And they ran this experiment in several cities, and after 2 years, they came to the conclusion it wasn't working. Now, I always suspected it wouldn't work anyway, but on the day they announced it wasn't working, is the same day Jaime Escalante died. Big article in the papers about Jaime Escalante, because most of you know, they made the movie Stand and Deliver about him. You go to Garfield High School in East LA, you'll see the mural to him, because he's a real person. He had a different theory of what it takes to motivate students. Escalante was an engineer before he went to Garfield to teach math. But when he got to Garfield, he was assigned to teach remedial math because that's basically all they offered, especially for new teachers. After a few days of teaching remedial math, Escalante said, this is a waste of time. These kids should learn calculus. His colleagues said, no, these kids are the children of factory workers and restaurant workers. They're not calculus material. He said, well, watch me. So he proceeds to teach calculus and to have his students take the AP, the advanced placement exam. Well, his kids passed. So they assumed they must have cheated and required his students to be tested again. And they tested again and they passed again. And he did this for several years in a row. In fact, the numbers grew from 19 the first year to over 80 kids after 19 years of teaching at Garfield. Well, along the way, they sent in researchers to study Escalante and found how is he getting such good results. And they sent in researchers from places like UCLA and USC to study his methods, and the researchers all came back and said the same thing. Said it's nothing but math. Nothing, no magic in it, no tricks. Because they didn't understand what Escalante called ganas. He was cultivating ganas in his students. What are ganas? I'm sure many of you on this call know. He was cultivating the desire to learn. Angela Duckworth calls that grit. Where does that come from? It comes from teachers who don't accept slop, but push their kids to do higher level work, getting them to work hard, getting them to come in on Saturdays if need be, working through the summer. I met one of his students. She was one of the many people who went out to the funeral to celebrate their former teacher. She said, everything you heard about Escalante is true. She is now the only Latina engineer at Boeing in Southern California. And together, she and I were at a robotics competition at Hawkins High School in LA on a Saturday. She's volunteering her time. She said, I'm here today because of what Escalante did for me. She said, when I was a student, he used to come to my soccer games. I said, he came to your games? He said, yep, but not to cheer me on. He told me I stunk at soccer, go back to math. And I'm so glad I did. That's why I'm an engineer today. One teacher changed the lives of dozens of kids. Imagine what happens when groups of teachers come together to do this work. I see I'm running out of time, so let me wind down with these questions. What are you doing to motivate and engage your students? What are you doing to support and cultivate effective teaching in the schools you work with? And how do you help teachers who struggle with crossing boundaries of race and class and language and culture, which is so critical to forging strong, positive relationships. John, I'll stop here and take some questions.
Please feel free to unmute if you have any questions for Dr. Noguera.
Or you can enter them in the chat as well. We're monitoring the chat.
I have a question. My name is Sandra Crawford. I'm in Imperial County, Region 6. And one of the things that I notice is that sometimes we don't get enough teachers to work in the after school program. And I'm not sure how to address that. I wish more people would be dedicated enough to stay after school for our students. So what do you suggest we can do to work with such a challenge?
It's tough because many teachers right now are stressed out too. And you know, many of them have their own lives, their own families, you know, and so teaching is hard. And right now we're seeing a lot of teachers burning out and leaving. It's projected that, you know, 25%, there's gonna be a 25% increase this year in the number of teachers who retire early because they're burning out. So I don't know if there's any easy answer. I would say that, you know, talk to the kids and find out who are the teachers that they connect with, and then reach those teachers to see if you can convince them to put in some extra time. The kids will tell us a lot about the teachers who really care. And those might be the ones we can reach. But I don't want to blame the teachers for being under stress right now. It's a difficult time.
Thank you, Dr. Noguera, for such a great presentation.
Thank you.
So we have one question here on the chat. It says here, any recommendations on evaluating and promoting higher levels of engagement?
Yeah, I spent time on that one image of that math class at Hollenbeck Middle School because I wanted you to kind of capture, imagine, this is what it looks like when kids are engaged, right? As you can see, they were up out of their seats, they were talking to each other, there was excitement in the room about a construction project. Doesn't take too much to get middle schoolers excited. It usually is about tapping into the curiosity of kids, you know, and that's why cultural relevance is so important, because when you do have kids doing something that's meaningful, it taps into their natural interest. You know, I have a daughter who is in elementary school here in LA, and they did an assignment on natural disasters, and she chose to do her project on tsunamis. And she was so excited that she came home to talk to me and talk to us about tsunamis, and we looked at several videos of tsunamis that have hit Japan, very scary. But the point is that the teacher had tapped into a topic and a subject that generated excitement among the kids. And that's what we want to remind teachers, that when you tap into the curiosity of your students, they're going to become willing learners, which is what we're after.
Thank you, Dr. Noguera, for that question. There's another question before that one, and I apologize, I didn't see it. It's from Ana Sandoval, and she asks, as a migrant program specialist for a school district, what would be the 3 priorities I should take away from my program? Also, fabulous, inspirational presentation.
Well, there's a lot there, so you'll get the slides, but I would say, you know, one is the concept of empower. You know, how do you get empowered as a learner? You're empowered when you have information. You're empowered when you understand what it takes to be successful. You're empowered when the adults who serve you tell you, you can do this, right? Inspire you so that you believe in yourself. So empowerment's got to be part of the goal here. Second, clear guidance. You know, migrant students, a lot of times, they just don't understand where education can lead, because if you don't come from a family with college-educated parents, a lot of times it's all a mystery to you, you know? And so clear guidance and getting that guidance to them early. Don't wait until 12th grade. Very, very important. And then I would say doing the work with the teachers so the teachers lift their expectations, but also have empathy. Empathy is so important, but empathy is not pity, right? Empathy is about understanding, seeing, recognizing the hardships they face, and at the same time, inspiring them to do their very best.
We have another question here. How do you overcome the barrier of rationalization? What are some initial steps that administrators can take?
Well, often what I do is, and you'll see, I didn't have enough time to go through it. I give examples of schools that serve the very kids we're talking about well, to show them it's being done. It can be done. Because sometimes the rationalizations come from them never having seen it done. You know, they say, I've been practicing this for a long time, migrant kids just don't do well. Say, oh no, well, guess what? There are some schools where they do well. And those schools are different. They have a better culture. They have that coherence. They have that welcoming atmosphere. They have a commitment to engaging parents. So, you know, you have to give them an example of success so they know what they're working toward. Otherwise, they'll continue to rationalize the patterns and act like they have nothing to do with it.
We have another question here. Can you describe the importance of lesson observations and specific feedback to support building professional capacity?
Yeah, many of you have heard of the idea of classroom studies, where you walk through the halls together and look in the classrooms. And this is best done with teachers. So they're seeing their colleagues. You want to make the learning visible. That idea came from, or the idea, it's called instructional rounds. That idea came from healthcare, where doctors, and if you've been in a hospital, know that often on a Monday morning, a lead physician will take the residents on a tour to visit the patients. And together, this is a teaching opportunity for the residents. And they'll go in and they'll talk to the patients, find out how they're doing, as a way to help the residents understand this is what bedside care looks like. This is how you work with parents. We need to do that with teachers, so they get a clear sense of what does good instruction look like, right? And then we need to give them a chance to plan together, because it's the isolation of teachers that contributes to so many of the problems, because you have teachers who don't know what they're doing and don't realize that down the hall there's another teacher who's excellent, who's figured this stuff out. And we have to give them a chance to see it, talk about it together, plan together, so they can change their methods. But I think the biggest obstacle is the isolation.
Thank you. Currently, please feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Good morning, Dr. Noguera. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Constantino Silva, Migrant Education in Salinas, Region 16, Monterey County. I just want to thank you for just that one, so many things that you said, but in particular, the one nugget that reminds us that kids who think they're going somewhere will make different choices to take them where they think they're going. So I appreciate that so much. That's a wonderful reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've been to Salinas. I know how hard it is there. So keep up the work.
Thank you.
I have first I want to just thank you so much for just inspiring us and giving us the ganas. Carola Solano Meres from San Diego, Region 9. I just wanted to speak on those courageous conversations that need to happen, and being comfortable with having others feel uncomfortable is huge. And it's the work that we need to do if we are going to move this forward, right? We have to be able to see the children in help the kids see themselves in the eyes that we see them, one, on the children's side. But on the adult side, those courageous conversations, sometimes when you look young, you're either Latina or you don't fit that model where you should have these courageous conversation. It's difficult in the leadership stance at times. What suggestions or would you have in building a foundation to begin this courageous conversations for this work, so we can move forward?
So, Carola, thank you for the question. I know what you're speaking to. You know, there are a lot of times people, you know, especially if you're young Latina, they might say, "Well, what do you know?" You know, and so sometimes, you know, you notice in my talk, I shared my own story, you know, about being a first generation, and you know, sometimes that is very powerful, you know, for them to hear your story and how education changed your life, because again, it reminds them of what's possible. It reminds them how powerful education could be. Nobody goes into education to hurt kids. Now, they may end up hurting them along the way because they lose sight of why they went there from the beginning. But if we can remind them that this is about making a difference for kids, especially the kids who need it the most, then we can hopefully, you know, tap into that original feeling of how do I make a difference for kids? And that's what we want to do. So it's not about, we don't want to get into blaming them because then they're going to get defensive. We do want to remind them, look, I was one of those kids too. And here I am today, a professional with a college degree. I'm a colleague. And I know that with the right support, we can get more kids to excel. So it is about, you know, tapping into that original impulse that led them into education.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Teresa Guerra from Region 17, Ventura County. And like everyone else, I'm very honored to hear your story and your advice that you've given us all. I did want to share that the two young ladies you shared in the beginning are from Ventura County and have participated in our migrant program. And the youngest one, Carla, was very, when she first came in as a newcomer, very quiet. And then she went through through the years, she became more open and very comfortable and very positive role model in herself. And that had to do because of the teachers and instructional assistants that work with her during the Saturday school. So it's true that, you know, if you have the right people and the right staff who believe in them, you know, they'll continue to grow. So thank you, and go USC. I'm from USC as well.
Thank you, Teresa. And thank you for sharing that, because you know, it just tells you, you know, when the kids feel they're surrounded by adults who believe in them, when they feel supported, when they feel like they belong, they start to thrive. And they may be quiet at first, but they will come into themselves as they feel connected and supported. Thank you.
My name is Margarita Palacios, and I work in North Monterey County Unified School District. So it's Castroville and Prunedale, part of Region 16. And my question is, this is my second year being part of migrant education, even though I have worked at the district for 25 years, is that how can we connect through the professional development with the amazing professional development that I have seen in the migrant program and the way that we are trying to train our teachers and the people that work with our migrant kids, but transfer that into the regular education program? How can we do this bridging. Sometimes I feel, at least in my district, that the migrant world is in one side and the rest of the school is in another side. And we maybe talk about the kids a little bit, but there is not that depth of knowledge when we are talking to our regular classroom teachers that are the ones that spend the most time with our children, about what are the strategies that they need to use every day, at every hour of the kids' time in the schools, especially if they're migrant and leaving. How do we bridge that? And it's about PD, but how can we have a greater impact on what is required at the district level? Like, I don't know if I'm clear with my question.
No, I get your question, Margarita, because we see the same thing happens with special ed. A lot of times there are people with expertise, but the expertise not being tapped by the district leaders. So that's why it's very important that people in leadership roles, superintendent, principals, understand the resources that you bring that can help them in serving migrant students. Because if you're marginalized, the students are going to be marginalized. And so they need to understand that you have expertise and knowledge about how to work with migrant students that will benefit their schools. Because a lot of times they may not even know that. So I encourage you to find a way to talk to the people in leadership about what you bring.
I think we have probably time for one last question. Okay, if there's no other questions, I don't see any other questions in the chat. I just want to say thank you very much, Dr. Noguera, for the time, for the wonderful, like everyone mentioned, the inspirational presentation. I think if we could physically clap, we would, but we're just going to do a virtual clap to you. Thank you so much. I'm going to also
thank you all for the work you do and for being there for the kids and being their advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if either Alicia or Selena, if you want to say a few words.